I'm Megan McClelland. I'm a professor at OSU. I work in human development and family sciences. I've been there for, it's getting to the point where it's like you don't want to admit, you know, how long you've been somewhere. So I think I've been there for 14 years now. I know. I teach infant and child development at the undergraduate level. Actually, Lauren told me she was in my class way back when. I'm like, oh, geez. Hopefully that was a positive experience for you. I always ask that question because I have two little kids, and they're all these student teachers, and they say, oh, I was in your class, and I went, how did that go for you? Really hoping it went okay. And my son is in kindergarten, and his teacher was also in my class, and so this is what happens, right, when you live in a small town. So you try to make everyone happy. So anyway, a lot of what the work of myself and my colleagues and my graduate students, who are fantastic, has focused on is how can we really help young children be successful in school. And we started looking at this like 15 years ago now, probably. And this has become of great interest recently. A lot of this is in the news, in the press, because there is two things happening. On the one hand, there's a lot of increasing focus on pushing down academic standards or helping, saying we need to do better at getting children these basic reading and math skills and other academic skills. At the same time, we have these reports, and so I guess what I want to say about that is that kindergarten looks a lot different now than kindergarten did when I was there. Right? And I felt like I was really successful in kindergarten when I could tie my shoes. I got a nap. I had and it was part day a lot of times. And there's still a lot of part day programs. Kindergarten looks very different now. My son gets a report card. It's very gentle, but it's still, there's some evaluation going on. At the same time, we've got these reports on a national level that children are experiencing a lot of difficulty, as many of them do just fine. But there's a substantial number of young kids that are really experience a lot of difficulty as they move from this relatively unstructured preschool environment to a more structured, and maybe we could argue an increasingly structured in some ways, academic, elementary school environment. That doesn't always work, and there have been some, you might have heard these reports, but national studies finding that there are more children expelled from preschool than are expelled between kindergarten and 12th grade combined. I don't know if you've heard those. Scary. I mean, you go, really? It just doesn't make any sense. I had a hard time believing that, and that's been out now for a while. And so what is going on? I mean, are we not having enough understanding of kids? But there seems to be one key mechanism or reason for that could be that children are really experiencing a lot of difficulty controlling themselves, their behavior, following directions. And so we talk about this in terms of, hopefully you can see this, hopefully my videos work. If not, I might just, I don't know, song and dance or something. But we talk about this in terms of self-regulation. Some people talk about this as executive function. We try to use as many terms as possible to make it as confusing as possible. I don't have a good reason, except that in the work that I do, we come at this from lots of different angles. Because this is such a hot area of work on many levels, people call it different things based on their background. I guess that was my simple explanation. But what are we talking about? We're talking about your ability, this conscious control of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, okay? Underlying this are these executive function processes in the front of your brain that focus on attention. Can you pay attention? Can you remember what you're supposed to do? Working memory and having some sort of inhibitory control, self-control. What we've been focusing a lot, and a lot of other people too, is how do these things translate into behavior for young kids in classroom settings or in other settings of their world? How does this translate into their behavior? So what does this look like? Well, I got to tell you, hopefully this thing will work, but this is it just tells you there is a whole focus right now on these executive function skills. Sesame Street, I've worked with Sesame Street on some of this, and I'll tell you that they are very, very, very interested in how we can sort of utilize research at many levels in games. I worked with them on some games that they put together that really sort of use these kinds of, try to exercise these cognitive skills. So as one example of Sesame Street doing self-regulation, I want to just show you what it looks like. If you've seen this one by Cookie Monster, have you seen Cookie Monster? Hopefully this works.
Dum-de-dum-de-dum, dum-de-dum. You there! You guys, Smiley! Yes, I am! You're the next contestant! The waiting game! We get to play waiting game. The game where we give you a cookie! We love this game! Cookie!
Wait!
Whoa, why wait?
Because this is the waiting game, and if you wait to eat the cookie until I get back, you get 2 cookies!
Oh, that sounds like good deal. Okay, me wait.
Good luck!
Oh, me kidding. Me no can wait. Me have to have cookie now.
Things come to those who wait. Yes, things come to those who wait.
Oh, who you?
We're the guy Smiley singers. Hey!
Oh, why waiting game have singers?
Because singing is a really great strategy to use when you have to wait for something that's really hard to wait for.
Oh, in that case, me try musical strategy. If me can wait to eat this cookie, that guy says he will give me 2. But will me singing help me wait? Oh, me haven't got a clue. Me want to eat this cookie now. Me have to wait somehow. Do me eat it? Do me wait? What do me do?
Remember, good things come to those who wait. Good things come to those who wait. Gotta learn how to strategy, get it straight. Good things come to those who wait.
Yeah. Me can use strategy. Me got it. Now we can win this waiting game. We will present this cool picture inside a pretty picture frame. Dum-de-dum-de-dum, dum-de-dum. Wow, me kidding. This no picture cookie, this real cookie.
Remember,
Wow.
things come to those who wait. Good things come to those.
I'm going to stop because I think it goes on, but the idea is, and on and on. But the point is that, Cookie Monster obviously is, this whole, it's called delay of gratification, right? You've heard of the marshmallow task, maybe, where, if you can wait for that second marshmallow, if Cookie Monster can come up with some strategies that will help him wait to get, to eat the cookie, then he'll get another one. And so what they did this work way back, in the 60s, and what they found 30 years later were the children that could wait for that second marshmallow, okay, sometimes up to 15 minutes. I mean, I think that I don't do that kind of work. It's like torture in my opinion. But the kids that can really wait for that second marshmallow or cookie did significantly better on SAT scores, long-term outcomes. And so what does this look like for kids in classrooms? Right there, you have it. Things like, it is the delay of gratification, which I'll get back to, but it's also just sort of like, more the cognitive ability to, can you listen? Can you follow directions? Can you ignore distractions? Can you focus and stay on task? Can you put away materials when you need to? Raise your hand instead of impulsively blurting out an answer. Remember and follow through with instructions, and then negotiate, right? How do you work well with others? So it's a lot. How many are teachers? Yeah, does this resonate? I mean, this is like what all teachers always say to me, that what's the most important thing coming into kindergarten? Parents think it's what?
Writing their name.
And what do teachers say it is? Can they transition? Can they follow directions? Can they manage themselves in appropriate ways? And so there's, certainly the early academics are important, but how do you learn to read if you can't sit still, right? So it's sort of what we've been doing a lot of is looking at sort of these what we call them the foundational learning skills. And a great way to think about it is not the what you learn skills, it's how you learn. It's really like how do you learn? How well can you learn? Not just the content of what you learn. So what is important? We know, and I can talk more about this, but if you have questions, what influences these skills in young kids? Well, we know certainly early temperament and personality is important, right? Some kids are just easier at these skills than others. Some kids are very mellow and they take in what's going on, and other kids are easily distracted and a lot more active. But that's malleable too, early on especially. Obviously, there's a ton that happens in the home and the family environment, high-quality parent-child interactions. I'm going to get a little bit to that at the end of my talk. And then, the things that we already know about, reading to yourselves, reading to your child, doing these stimulating activities at home, which I'll give some examples of. In the classroom, autonomy support, so helping scaffold or helping children learn how to problem solve independently, is actually quite good for these skills. And play turns out to be quite important early on for the development of these skills, because play is very cognitively complex, even though parents seem to think, it's easy to see, well, what's really going on? They're just playing. When children especially do make-believe play, it's very cognitively complex. Why do we care so much about these skills? Well, the reason that we care is they turn out to predict a long-term outcomes, a variety of them. So things like, obviously, if you have good ability to pay attention, remember what you have to do, get along with other kids, other kids like you, right? You don't overreact when something happens. You don't fly off the handle. So social skills or their social competence. It also self-regulation or self-control, think willpower, helps you in terms of obesity and helping you sort of resist temptation, the second cookie or the fourth cookie. A lot of what my colleagues and I have been focusing on for a long time is sort of how are these foundational learning skills important for your short and long-term academic success. And what we often find is that these skills predict long-term academic success controlling for, so this is taking into account this child's intelligence level, taking into account their early academic skills. In fact, what we found in one recent study was that children that were rated actually by parents as having strong ability to pay attention and persist, okay, two pieces of self-regulation, early self-regulation, when they were 4 years old, had nearly 50% greater odds of finishing college by the time they were 25. This we controlled for reading and math skills. So we took into account, we actually thought reading and math would be, what we thought would happen actually was that, okay, fine, your ability to pay attention and persist was going to lead to better reading and math, which it did, and the reading and math would lead to better college completion. Actually, what we found was that the stronger predictor of whether or not you finish college was your age 4 attention and persistence, not your reading and math. Was measured at 8, 12, 16, or 21, which is a little depressing, actually. 21, really? So we only asked, this was a longitudinal study of about 400 kids, and they only asked them, did you complete college? Okay, not how well you did. So they had to complete. It was, may not have done as well. But the point is, it gets right back to that Cookie Monster example of delaying gratification, right? Can you just persist, get through college? Hopefully it's not a horrible experience, but some of it isn't super fun, right? So some of those difficult things. And in some ways you could argue that there are some children today that, including undergraduates that I teach, that have a hard time persisting through difficult tasks, right? And so most of them are great, right? But there are some. The other reason that people are interested in these skills, or this skill set, is that it shows that it predicts, this is James Heckman, He's a Nobel laureate in economics, and he's found that it pays off to invest in early education, right? Because he calls them soft skills, which is not really right, but I'm not going to tell him that. But it predicts long-term health and educational outcomes. It predicts higher wages. And so there's something really important about these skills. They're not everything, but there's something that turns out to be quite important in terms of being foundational. The problem is that the kids we're most worried about, those disadvantaged kids or kids that are coming in with different kinds of risk factors, really struggle academically, and they really struggle with these skills. And so in one quick example of a study we did a few years ago, headed by a former student of mine, that purple, we looked at children that were low income as defined by Head Start, and we looked at just their growth of self-regulation, okay, from preschool through the end of kindergarten. And what we found was that we had low income English language learners. All of those kids these are not bilingual. These are low, very disadvantaged English language learners, okay? So it's important to say. Those are the purple line. And then the low-income English speakers are the blue. And then we had also within the same study that orange line, which is the more not low-income English-speaking kids, okay? What we found just without any intervention, we were just tracking their growth over time, was that by the end of kindergarten, the low-income kids that were English speakers were able to catch up on these self-regulation skills to their more advantaged peers. But the kids that had it's like a double whammy. They not only were disadvantaged, right? So they're going into school with all that encompasses, okay? All that context of risk growing up. But also they were having to learn English as a second language, which is very challenging, right, initially. And so when you've got the double whammy, we call it like cumulative risk, that makes it really difficult for those kids. I do want to say that bilingualism is associated with better self-regulation or executive function skills because it involves the switching back and forth between languages. So we have something called a cognitive advantage when you really are bilingual. The problem is these little kiddos are not bilingual yet. Hopefully they'll get there for sure. But so they're learning language and they're also really disadvantaged. So they have a lot going on that they're struggling with. And then you see what are the reasons we have achievement gaps? How can we decrease that early on? But my good side of my story is that what we also found in another study was, okay, kids that are experiencing multiple risk factors struggle with these skills, but even when kids are at risk, the ones that were able to demonstrate that they had, their parents or their teachers said that they were able to pay attention, they had some strong self-regulation skills, though that served as like a buffering effect. So self-regulation turns out to be really an important buffer for kids, especially those experiencing whatever risk factor. So there's lots of different kinds of risk. I'm not just saying it's just disadvantage or being an English language learner. Kids that have special needs of any type. So if you can help support these skills early on, that can be a real protective factor for young kids. And the reason so there are two reasons that people have been very interested in this skill set. One is that it seems to predict a lot of long-term outcomes that we care about. But the second reason is it turns out these skills are very malleable. They're changeable. We can do something to improve them. And it's an interesting, there's a lot of research going on. This is a very, very hot area right now. And I had a reporter once from the Oregonian ask me, well, I don't believe that. So I went, okay. She said, I just think that kids are born with what they have on these skills, and you either have it or you don't. So I went, well, okay, I don't know what to tell you except here, let me just send you a whole bunch of studies, not done by myself, but by other people, that are really showing that these skills turn out to be quite malleable. And so what we are now finding is that this is still spotty. Let me tell you, you all know, right? It's really hard to make change happen out there in the real world. And so what we use are these randomized control trials where it's like the drug trials, right? Where you randomly assign kids to get an intervention or not, or they might get a delayed intervention, right? If you have some evidence for ethical reasons that this thing works. So you might randomly assign them to get it or not, and then you sort of chart. That's a more stronger, robust test of whether or not this thing works. And it's really hard to do this work out there. But I will say that there's accumulating evidence that there are different kinds of interventions that have really been shown to improve these skills in young kids in terms of their self-regulation and academic success. One of the things that we've focused a lot on is the components of activities that really help kids practice these skills. So sometimes when these programs don't show strong effects, you don't really know why. So you look at, well, what was going on, right? So I don't know, are you familiar with Tools of the Mind? Is anyone familiar with Tools of the Mind? So it's this preschool curriculum that's all about self-regulation. And there's been some spotty results. I mean, one large randomized control study said this does not work at all. But another one just came out showing really some nice effects. And what seems to be the case is trying to hone in on the pieces or the key mechanisms or components of these programs that are most important. And so on the one hand, you want to have broad, comprehensive programs, right? That at various multi-level, multi-generation, all of that. It's hard, though, with those big programs to know what really is working within them and what isn't. And so there's different ways that people have approached it, and there's no good, bad, there are strengths and weaknesses to both. What we have done is we've found that there are certain activities that do three things. They help children stop, think, and then act. And those kinds of activities turn out to really exercise these executive function processes. So your cognitive processes in the brain that I was talking about, the attention, the working memory, and this inhibitory control, the self-control piece. And I'm going to walk through one example of this. But we've done 2 of these kinds of randomized trials. And what we did was we just went in and I don't know if you're familiar, we do this in kindergarten too, but we kind of take over circle time in the preschool. And for about 20 minutes, we play these games with kids that are not different than games you already know. Red light, green light, stop, start kinds of games. We just add new rules. We make them more cognitively complex. So when you add in new rules, you actually have to stop and do the opposite and think about it. The more you can help kids practice those skills, the better it turns out they're able to control themselves and pay attention, problem solve. And then we found some very nice effects on also better academic outcomes. Why is that? Well, because by helping you stop and think before you just react, you are more likely to, like for math, for example, to problem solve a math, what you need to walk through to successfully complete a math problem. So there are actually quite strong links between these self-regulation components and your math skills, it turns out. So I'm going to show you, and I will say this is coming out across the board. Like who do we intervene with? Who's it work best with? And what those kids were most worried about early on, it works best with those low-income kids. So we found this across the country. Different people are finding this. It's one of the most stable findings that we have with these randomized trials. And we're all getting at this different ways. So when you can show replication of those kinds of findings across different kinds of programs, I think that's using these sort of large-scale randomized trials that are very expensive, and they really get more at causal relations. Causal effects, really. They're not just this is related, this is causing the outcome because you're randomly assigning and you're controlling for all unmeasured things out there, if that makes sense, between the two groups. So it's a much stronger test. what we found in ours is that the children that were in our little intervention group, and I can describe it, who were these most disadvantaged in our sample, okay, that were reflected in our demographic. These are low-income English language learners, not middle income, but these were those kids that really had significant disadvantage, but they were learning language. They showed the biggest gains, oh my gosh, like 23-point gain in math skills over preschool, the preschool year from fall to spring. I mean, it was just stunning compared to the kids in the control group. We found some effects on early literacy, less strong. What we do in this intervention is it's more targeted, so there are really good interventions out there that I can talk about, like tools of the mind. You know, I think the evidence is a bit mixed, but there's really some nice, strong evidence coming out for the effects, the strong effects of it. There's also other large, more comprehensive programs that are showing some nice effects. We took a more targeted approach, like I was saying, about these specific components of activities. So that's a strength and a weakness, frankly. What we did was we went in over 8 weeks, and we randomly assigned kids to one group or the other. We pre-tested everybody up front, okay, before, and then we randomly assigned them into one group or the other. The intervention group were our business as usual control group. They just got their normal preschool everyday experience. And the kids in the intervention group, twice a week, we had people come in, our research assistants who used to be teachers, and they sort of did circle time. And they went through, there was a hello song, then we had different games, like I'll show you. And then we did a goodbye song. So that happened, they got 8 hours over 8 weeks, okay? Twice a week for 20 to 30 minutes each time. And then we retested everybody, and the control group just got their normal preschool day. And at the very end, we went back a month later, and we retested everybody. And then once we retested everybody, the control group actually got the intervention because we had had some evidence that it worked, and we felt like it was really important. Also with our partnership with the school district we were working with, we felt that it was really important for everyone to have access to this if there was any evidence that it was helpful. So we found really nice effects that way. So improved ability on 2 direct assessments of your ability to pay attention, follow directions, switch. These are executive function or self-regulation games we play with them. One, I'll just quickly tell you, I didn't include it in this talk. Wait, am I almost out of time? Do I? No, okay. All right, but I'll quickly tell you, the one thing that we do is called the head, toes, knees, shoulders task. I don't know if anyone's heard of this, but so you say, first I want you to touch your head, and then I want you to touch your toes. And you say, okay, now we're going to be a little silly. When I say touch your head, instead of touching your head, I want you to touch your toes. When I say touch your toes, I want you to touch your head. So you're doing something that's different from what I tell you to do. So we help kids with this, and then we add in new rules. It gets pretty hard. And I also give this to my undergraduates. I'm like, guys, like seriously? We give them to 4-year-olds. They find it really hard. You should get this. And they didn't all get it. So I'm like, so you might want to know that how you do on this game takes 5 minutes, predicts the gains you make academically over the school year. It predicts much stronger gains. So the stronger you do on this task, you make bigger gains academically. So I said, you might want to practice this game before the midterm. Anyway, I don't know that they believed me. But so we assess these skills, and then we also have, because that's kind of like our games we play in the classroom, we also have a different kind of game that isn't involved, like isn't gross motor. It's a similar kind of task. So we test kids on different assessments. The kids in our intervention group made significant progress, bigger progress on their performance on these tasks, okay? It taps your ability to stop. You have to remember what you have to do. You have to pay attention. You have to do the opposite. Really difficult, by the way, when you're 4 or 5 to do this. In fact, it's a little hard for some kids, and we are just now looking at making it easier, expanding it downward. But And then you have to switch the rules. We actually switch the rules on them. So it's even more complicated. But it works all the way through eight years or so, and we've used it all over the world. And colleagues are using it all over the world as a research tool. So let me just show you, though, the games. So this is a clip from, there's a book out called Mind in the Making, the 7 Essential Skills That Every Child Needs. And it's by a woman named Ellen Galinsky. And it's a very popular parenting book, which is very good. I'm working with Ellen right now on an evaluation of her Mind in the Making. We're incorporating our games into some of her work in Indiana. But she came to Portland and wanted me to, anyway, I don't have a good video of these games except for this cheesy video of that she made. So unfortunately, I'm in it. But it's the only thing I have that shows you a little clip of what they look like. And so they're not that different than what often teachers are doing in the classroom. But let me just, hopefully this works.
We did an intervention with the Circle of Time, randomly assigned children to intervention.
I kind of said this already, I'm sorry.
Group. And then what we did was we had children for 8 weeks go through these intervention games that were similar to these Circle of Time.
I don't know if you could see that, sorry.
But each week, each session, they increased in complexity. So they continued to add in new rules. And what we do with red light, green light is we start reversing the rules. And so usually in red light, green light, red means stop and green means go. And so we have them stomp their feet when we see when I put up the green circle, and the red circle means to stop. And then reverse it. So green is stop and red is stomp your feet. And then we change the colors. So blue may be clapping and yellow is stopping. And so then we can change the actions, and we can reverse those also. It can get quite challenging, and I think you have to be a little careful that you proceed sort of gradually into each level so that children get each rule before you add in a new one. One finding that we have that's pretty exciting is that the children who are low-income English language learners in our intervention group demonstrated an additional 10-point gain in math compared to other children in the intervention.
So, and what I didn't say really clearly was, so overall there was a 23-point gain in math compared to kids in the control group. Compared to other kids in the intervention group that were just also getting it, but were not, our low-income English language learners made an additional 10-point gain, even from the rest of the kids in the group. So that was really exciting because it tells us that there's a lot we can do that are pretty easy to implement. They don't take a lot of materials. I have a graduate student who's just flying back from Indiana right now, actually, and trained some teachers on these games to use. So we kind of use these games and activities, and one example is, this is a clip someone put in, but from Vroom, which I'll talk to you about. Is anyone familiar with Vroom? Some of you? Okay, yeah, I know you guys. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'm on the advisory board for it, and it's the Bezos Family Foundation in Seattle, and I'll just tell you that they have done, I would say, a really, really nice job of getting together really fantastic material, very easy. They have an app, and they have these tips, these parenting tips that are all based, they call it brain building moments. Okay, you want to increase the brain building moments with your child, and it's all free, and you go and you can download the app, and it will tell you, you can personalize it. I have one because I have a 4-year-old, and it will say, when you and Karina are in the car today, try this. And it's everyday experiences that they're just trying to encourage, and they focus on language and vocabulary, sort of how to build these moments, interactive moments with your child. They also focus on executive function and self-regulation skills. And so they use these kinds of games, like dance with your child, you dance slow to slow and fast to fast, and then mix up the rules. And so they take some of the games from our study, and I'll give you quick examples, like the freeze game. Everyone uses the freeze game already, right? We just change the rules. So you stop, start game, but then we say, okay, I'm gonna put on the fast music. When I put on the fast music, instead of dancing fast, I want you to dance slow. when I put on the slow music. So you have to build up to this. My 3-year-old, well, she's almost 4. Oh my gosh, this is like her favorite thing ever. She loves this game. And you know, as a parent, I mean, you come home, I have 2 young kids. You know, let's face it, we're tired, you know, and it's you don't have a lot of, I guess I'm maybe supposed to know, I don't know, but I run out of good ideas. Like, what do you do? You know, I'm sort of brain dead by the end of the day. And when I did this, when we would put on music and I'd go through my iPhone and I would just do fast, slow music, it was super fun. And it was just something different that I don't usually, I was like, oh yeah, this is really fun for us to do together. So it's just another thing. We do another game where it's, this is like their most favorite game ever. Sleeping, all the children are sleeping. You pretend to sleep. It's a great way to get them quiet. Then when they wake up, they have to be different animals. And then you can put up a picture of a different animal and then take it away so they have to remember it. You can switch the animals. There's new rules you can add in. The kids get to, if they can raise their hand and follow directions, they get to say what kind of animal they want to be. So that one's a big, and I really want to say that these were really developed by Shauna Tomini, who was a former student of mine who's at Yale University now, and she's just like so unbelievably, she's like one of those people that's just like good at every single thing she does. It's sort of nauseating. But she's just brilliant. She was a teacher and she's also a musician. And she came up with, she said, look, I was playing these games with the kids in my class and I just sort of added these new things. And so over time, she and I have worked on these. But it's the same idea of conducting an orchestra. You take turns. You can go fast with the baton, slow. You can use a pencil. You don't need a baton, right? I mean, these are real basic. Then I showed you red light, green light. Okay. So let's talk about what can you do, basic things. What we know is very interesting research coming out on parenting even, that parents who can, these skills develop, they're certainly not there at 3. I wouldn't expect them to be there. We have to be really careful. We don't expect 3-year-olds to be able to sit there and do flashcards and worksheets. It's not an appropriate way. It's not a good, fun way for them to learn. But if you can help them problem solve and then you don't do everything for them, you try to back off a little bit. This is very challenging if you're a parent. It's very challenging if you're a parent and you're in a rush. I'm living this right now. And so what do you say is you have to sort of back off, right? We live in this era of helicopter parenting. I mean, and I just want to whack myself, you know? I mean, I actually caught myself telling my 3-year-old how to do the Play-Doh for we're doing some make-believe thing. And I said, well, why don't you do this? And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, stop, let her do whatever she wants. It's her Play-Doh, it's Play-Doh, you know, but you forget. So in the one study they did, this is related to research, in one study they did, the parents that were able to do what they call autonomy support, okay? So scaffolding as needed, so helping kids, support kids, and then sort of letting go of that and letting them problem solve. Those children developed better self-regulation skills, okay? These were like 2- and 3-year-olds. So that's a great way. Obviously, we know responsive parenting is really important. You want to have a really warm relationship with high expectations and very appropriate limits. So I believe in you. You're a great kid. And I know because of that, I believe that you can do up here, you know, and so really that combination of high warmth and high expectations, we all know, is really good. A strong home learning environment. These are things that we often already know a lot about, but you know, you want to have lots of stimulating materials in the home, reading to yourself and to your child every day, encouraging them. Limiting TV and screen time, I can talk more about that. Screen time isn't necessarily a bad thing. Certainly before 2, you want to really limit it. problem with screen time mostly is that it's a passive way that children are experiencing things. It does not help their cognitive development. In the first few years of life, kids learn best by acting on their world. They're these little scientists. That's what I always talk about in my class. And the way they learn best is by putting stuff in their mouth and feeling and touching and tasting things. And so the more you can have the interactive, so iPads are not necessarily a terrible thing if they're really an interactive sort of back and forth, but there's also been a lot of research that that's not always the best way for kids to learn, I will say. It can also interfere with vocabulary because they're not talking as much to parents. And then learning activities that promote self-regulation. Puzzles. I never thought of this, but my kids around 3 and 4 got crazy puzzle crazy. It's fantastic for not only visual, spatial. I mean, who does puzzles anymore? I mean, lots of kids, I'm sure. But, it's a really fantastic way to spend time with your child on the floor. It's like the lost art of puzzles and blocks. Block play are making a comeback. But those very basic things turn out to be very, very good cognitively for little kiddos. Okay, self-regulation is one piece. It's not everything. I really want to convey that there is no magic bullet here. Self-regulation can be one piece of this foundation, okay, that you provide kids with. That also has to include warm and responsive caregiving. It has to include the resources parents need to have in order to provide the environment for their kids, all of that stuff together. It is a big piece. It's, I think in conjunction with embedding early math and literacy content is really, really effective when you can do these games. So a lot of times with our games in the classroom, we also put up letters and then we take down letters. And so they're fun, music and movement based. There's also some early literacy letter identification going on. But in fun, engaging ways in context, there's a lot of research to support that's a really effective. Math too. I have to always put in a plug for math. We don't do enough math early on, and math predicts later reading more than early reading. Do you know that? Stronger predictor, early math skills predict later reading better. Early reading, don't get me wrong, is very important. Boy, is it important. We spend a lot, and there's a whole process of decoding that whole thing. So my child's experiencing right now. Self-regulation, though, in terms of sort of that foundation, can protect a child from some risk factors, and so the more we can try to help promote that in them, I think it's a protective factor. And then we know that it predicts sort of school readiness and then school success, and I think, as I've already said, it can be improved. How do we then work together, right, in communities with parents, schools, and communities? I'm really into trying to bridge. I think that the P3 funding is a great example of how they're trying to bridge that. I mean, and a lot of time, I've done this work now in Oregon for 14 or 15 years, and I don't see a lot of bridging across the early childhood to the elementary worlds. I think that's changing. I'm really excited by that because we need to talk more. We need to integrate these components of these successful intervention into everyday practice. That's really hard to do. I mean, teachers are really overloaded. They're really low, and one of the biggest predictors of these interventions, whether they work, is whether or not teachers or whoever's doing it, parents buy in, and they find it feasible, they find it effective, and practical. And so it's great if you have this super, wonderful intervention, but if it takes, lots and lots of days of intense training, it's difficult, I think, in the long run to sustain that. So how can we, unless you do booster, you can sustain that. I'm not saying that that isn't an important thing. You just have to really be on top of it to continue to do the booster sessions that can continue that. And I think that once, I don't want to downplay, like tools of the mind can be it's very intensive, but I think once you buy in and you find it to be working for you, you do it, and so it can be extremely effective. I obviously am a researcher, so I'm always pushing, plugging the use research effectively. How can we bridge this better? And so to translate the work we do into practical ways that are useful for parents and teachers. And then how can we help families and everyone increase our understanding of child development? And then these activities, I think, they're not everything. They're just a few examples of some things that can help promote these skills in young kids. So just to, I think, conclude, what I'll say is I hope I've convinced you a little bit that this set of skills is an important predictor of some pretty important short and long-term outcomes, and that improving the communication and links among these different schools and families and community organizations, I think, is really important and needed to promote success. But you all know that, I'm sure. So I will, oh, and there's one more thing I was going to say. I just added this today. I have some resources that I put up, and I stuck this quickly at the very last minute onto some things. It's been a long day. I taught for 2 hours this morning. So resources I can share with you. Oh, and I never have done this before, but we actually have a book. I've never done a book like this, and so I thought, well, because we do a lot of this kind of talking to people, and we get lots and lots and lots of requests for these activities and that sort of thing, so we threw together a book. Shauna is the most amazing colleague I've got in some ways, and so it's coming out. It's not out yet, but I don't know. It might be helpful for some people. And there's some great, if you guys have seen the Mo Williams, if you know the Piggy and Elephant, we're a big fan. But Waiting is Not Easy. It's a great book that came out not too long ago. It's hysterical. So I'll just stop there. Okay, thank you. Happy to take any questions. You had
mentioned an app that you could have.
Yeah, it's called Vroom. If you, it's this, join Vroom right there. Vroom, and this is all funded, it's all free. It's all funded by the Bezos Family Foundation. And if you go to joinvroom.org, they have, you say, download our app. I have it on my phone. It pops up every morning. Look at your brain building tip for the day. So, I mean, I think it works to the extent that you go in, you look at it, and they are very practical. And then you can click on it, and it will say the Brainy Research on the back, and it will say, and they have amazing people on. I'm not talking about me at all. I am talking about Jack Schoenhofer in the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard, Clancy Blair, Adele Diamond. These people are the absolutely top in the world doing work on these skills, language development. So they contributed to the tips. So they're very based in pretty hard research.
It also has snacks, correct?
Yes, thank you. I think it is. Is it? Did they? I don't know if it is now out.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and it's totally free. And they have these little splash cards. I mean, it's fun. I read through them. I'm like, oh yeah, I could do that. I mean, you know, there's stuff that you don't always think about, but they're trying to incorporate into your everyday activities. When you're in the bath, you know, your child's taking a bath, do this. You know.
And you can put multiple children in. So
Yeah.
if you have a 5-year-old, it gives you suggestions for your 5-year-old. And if you have a 6-month-old, it gives you suggestions for your 6-month-old.
Yeah.
All the same time. So you have multiple children, you put multiple in.
It's cool. And then it personalizes it. And they don't do anything with that information, you know. So I have my daughter in. So it's been fun. Yeah.
Are your slides available that might be able to have you?
Yes. Yeah. So I'll PDF them and I'll put them. Yeah.
So we're going to have the presentation posted on our school district website, and the slides will be available on that link as well.
Yeah.
One other question. Have you thought of doing little YouTube videos on some of those names and activities? Is that's how I learn things.
I know.
And then to go try it.
And then go try it. Yes. We're not quite at that place. So we just actually it looks like we're getting 2 new 4-year grants funded at the same time, which is a little out of control. But one of them would be to further develop the games. And one of them is to further develop our little head-toes measure. And so that's kind of where we're going. We sort of did all this initial, it's all kind of in the researchy world, because we were like, we don't know if this thing works. But we have been working with the school district in Fairfax County, Virginia, and I'll just quickly say that they have, if you can believe this, 14,000 entering kindergartners a year. And they have a significant number, about 1,500 of those little kiddos have not experienced any kind of preschool, Head Start, or any kind of program. And they have a Bridge to Kindergarten summer program before they get to kindergarten, which is like a how you do kindergarten, right? Little tutorial for those kids over 3 weeks. And so we have been working with them for the last few summers to train their teachers. And we did some things. And so their teachers, I mean, you know, we're still developing this. I mean, the teachers, we were like, does this work for you? Do you find this feasible? And then they got data on teachers saying that they continue to use these games throughout the year. So that's worse.
Is it anywhere more in writing than this on how to do some of these?
Yeah, so we did put them all in our book. It's just the book's not quite out, but they do have them all in there. In some of our papers we've published, we have a little bit more, and then we've started doing some trainings to the extent that we can manage all of that. Yes, we are helping. We're doing some of that. So, yes. So it's all there. Yeah, yeah.
It works.
It's gotten. There's a lot going on, which is exciting stuff. Yeah. So. Other questions? I want to stop. I'm sorry we went a little over here, but thank you so much for your attention.